Hello, Andreas.
Hannes.
Let's talk about the current legal situation for Pedelecs epochs in Europe. 250 watt, 25 kilometers per hour.
Sure.
And who are you?
I'm a physicist and started working on light electric vehicles, Pedelecs, in the 90s, and sort of did base research about series hybrids up to 2005. And later, I, in addition, did a master in medical physics, respectively in rehabilitation engineering. And that's why I have a certain interest in the inclusion topic.
Yeah. So the Pedelec became quite big in the last years, despite the limits of the legislation. And I remember 12 years ago, we made a definition in the Go Pedelec program for an alternative, better legal framework. But let's talk about the current framework. So the current framework, the nominal rated power of 250 watt, is this real?
Well, on the transparency, you see how huge the spectrum is of different users. The spectrum of users ranges from, say, people with disabilities, maybe able to deliver 1 watt at the pedal, up to very strong athletes, and huge variety. Then we have a very broad spectrum of applications, from two-wheelers up to multi-track vehicles, even boats, different purposes of the application, from shopping to off-road, mountain bike. And on top of that, we also have different payloads. Sometimes it's 0 kilograms, nothing. Sometimes it's a base. In the case of cargo bikes, it might be a pallet weighing dozens or maybe even some 100 kilograms. And in case of multi-person vehicles or tandems, we might have a group of cyclists. Some cyclists might pedal, all cyclists might pedal, but a certain number of kids or adults might just be passengers, not contributing to pedaling. And the thing is, if you want to apply the Pedelec principle, and the Pedelec principle says that the human is assisted by a motor, which then means that the exertion or the stress or the load onto the cyclist is limited. If we look at the scale, at the rating of perceived exertion, in earlier times it was called the Borg scala. People love to move. They love to move if, say, the RP value, this rating value, is between 9 and 13. But they hate not to move. The Pedelecs riders wouldn't ride a moped. I mean, they didn't buy one. They bought the Pedelec because they want to move. And but in daily situations, Pedelecs riders do not want to have a huge load on them, do not want to be stressed. They want movement, but not an extreme high rating of perceived exertion, except maybe in training, but not in daily situations. So that means the Pedelec allows the human to cycle, but in a band of exertion, not too little exertion, not too much. And the motor sort is a load balancer. The motor takes the peak, or when going uphill, the motor supports for a longer time. Yeah, and this Pedelec principle is loved by many humans. Pedelecs are a huge market success. And on the transparency, you see the first Pedelecs that came in the 90s, they had a very narrow definition, 25 kilometers an hour, 250 watts continuous power. then in the times when they were introduced to the markets, this might have been okay. But nowadays, people want to apply this Pedelec principle, as I said, to a huge variety of applications. And that's why the 250 watts limit is a huge hindrance. Because for many of these applications or uses or riding purposes, and for many heavier payloads, 250 watts are simply not enough.
So the 250 watt, is this a real number from your point of view? Or is this like I see from many vehicles, for example, tandems or even bikes with space for 4 people, for people with disabilities to enjoy mobility together, active mobility together. Anyhow, with the 250 watt nominal rated power, today it's already difficult. And now we have discussions currently to limit the maximum power to 750 or even only 600 watt. And how do you see this? Will it be possible to make meaningful products, grow the market, and allow inclusion of people with disabilities, of elderly citizens, of children, and with this legal framework?
Well, in cases where you have combinations, for example, 3 or 4 people on a cycle which can carry a group of cyclists, and if only one is pedaling and the others are maybe not fit or just recover from an illness or could not deliver lots of pedaling power, then 600 watts for sure is not enough, especially if you go steep up. Let me explain. The force, the traction force or the traction torque or traction power at the wheel depends on the drive state. And the drive state of a vehicle is given by 3 parameters. First, slope, second, acceleration, and third, speed. Now, on average, the world is flat. But the thing is, the main, from a Swiss point of view, for example, the main purpose of a power assist, an Neupert Pedelec drive, is to really help on hills. And say, if you want to start on a 15% slope with a number of people on a vehicle, maybe only 1 or 2 pedaling, the others being passengers, if you want to accelerate fast enough so that you can really start riding on that slope, 600 watts are too little. And by the way, what is even more important than power is torque. And I mean, even in urban environments, if you want to ride out of underground garage, the ramp out of the garage may easily have a slope of 15%. So just starting there or even continuing to ride on a slope, dependent on situation, requires more. So the thing is, if a designer, a vehicle designer says, okay, I designed the range of slopes a vehicle should be able to ride on, I limit the maximum acceleration and I limit the speed, a designer of a vehicle can then perfectly choose a drive system with a certain torque and a certain power. And this is a much better situation than as of today. If you look at these rectangles, the brown rectangles here on the transparency, this marks the range you can do without any problems with this EU-compatible Pedelec, with a Pedelec having a continuous motor power limited to 250 watts. But you cannot cover the range. But today, people try to apply these EU 25-250 compatible drives to virtually any application, which can be seen on this graph here. And this for sure doesn't work. So, and limiting power and torque means that you limit the spectrum of applications you can serve with drives, with Pedelec drives, with EPAC drives. And I think for the consumer, this would be a sad situation, because, as I said, consumers like Pedelecs, and the EPAC drives are applied to even to a growing spectrum of applications, vehicles, and also in the carrier cycle domain, huge payloads are transported. So yes, 250 watts or any fixed number as a limit is a hindrance. And let me repeat, if you define slope, acceleration, and speed, and if you limit all these three parameters indirectly, and this is physics, the equation of motion is saying this, indirectly power is limited. So I propose, and you do too, to limit acceleration rather than power or torque.
So the current concept came from the idea which was developed since 1994, first by the German legislation, to have the definition something which could be considered as a cycle and legally become equal to a cycle on the power limited safety concept. And today we have probably about 20 million Pedelecs sold and operated within the European Union, maybe even a little bit more. But we both agree, looking on your graph, that most of the applications are not yet really came to blossom and be part of the mobility evolution, which we urgently need also in the context of the climate catastrophe to decarbonize transport. This means that we need a solution which, on one hand, secure the bicycle character, and on the other hand, allow applications which help that more and more use cases can be covered by Pedelec vehicles, and the dependence on cars will be dramatically reduced.
Yeah, well, I see the legal aspect of this regulation, of course, and I say, if you, as a designer of vehicles, you understood the Pedelec principle, if on one hand you can design a FES cycle, functional electrical stimulation cycle, and when the paraplegic persons riding that cycle say, my rating of perceived exertion is approximately in between 9 and 13. And on the other hand, if you can design an electric mountain bike, and the sporty mountain bike rider says, hey, when going uphill, my rating of perceived exertion is between 9 and 13, then you have understood the Pedelec principle, because then you can apply it to any application, any conceivable application, and you could never claim that it's a moped, because the rating of perceived exertion is bigger than 0. And just pressing a throttle is the rating of perceived perception or exertion, the RP value would 0 or be close to 0. So you see, you can discriminate mopeds and cycles. even if they are electrically power-assisted cycles or pedelecs.
Okay. So in a second talk, we will talk about the alternative proposal, the acceleration-based safety concept, as a proposal to match the interest of the European Union to keep the pedelec as close as possible to a cycle from the safety in all situations and of all versions. And on the other hand, allow the mobility evolution to continue and have more green transportation with active mobility. So Andreas, thanks a lot.
Welcome. See you next time. Bye.